Sign this. I'm done with this marriage.
Please don't do this.
Sign this and stop wasting my time.
What? Are you serious? I can't believe this. How could this happen? What? What did you just say? My dad is dead? How? When? I'm on my way now.
After divorce, she inherits her dad's fortune and returns. Ex-husband was shocked. Distinguished viewers, welcome to Luxury True Life Stories. Please like and subscribe for more amazing real-life luxury stories. Now, let's get into the story. Caroline Desmond was the only daughter of the powerful billionaire Pascal Desmond, a man whose companies dominated several major industries. Despite growing up surrounded by luxury, massive estates, and elite social circles, Caroline was not fascinated by wealth. She was raised by her father to value humility, intelligence, and kindness. Pascal always told her that money could attract many people, but it could never guarantee genuine love or loyalty. And like many heirs who enjoyed showing off their fortune, Caroline preferred a quiet life. She loved reading books, painting simple landscapes, and visiting ordinary places where people treated her like anyone else. Over time, she began to feel uncomfortable with how people behaved whenever they discovered she was Pascal Desmond's daughter. Many friendships suddenly became artificial, and every man who approached her seemed more interested in the Desmond fortune than in her heart. Wanting to discover true love and genuine relationships, Caroline made a bold decision. Without revealing her identity, she left the wealthy environment she had always known and moved to another city to live a simple life under a modest lifestyle. She believed that somewhere in the ordinary world, she might finally meet someone who would love her for who she truly was, not for the empire her father owned. She had no idea that this decision would soon lead her into a life-changing relationship with a man named Joseph Bernard. Caroline's new life was far from the luxury she had grown up with, yet it felt strangely refreshing. She rented a small apartment in a quiet neighborhood far from the glamorous districts of the city. The place was simple, white walls, a narrow balcony overlooking a busy street, and furniture that was modest but comfortable. For the first time in her life, Caroline experienced ordinary routines. She cooked her own meals, took evening walks through nearby parks, and spent many afternoons reading at a small neighborhood cafe that quickly became her favorite place. The cafe was warm and welcoming, filled with the smell of fresh coffee and the quiet hum of conversations. No one there knew she was the daughter of a billionaire, and that anonymity gave her a deep sense of peace. One evening, heavy rain began pouring unexpectedly as Caroline sat near the cafe window reading a novel. The streets outside quickly became soaked, and people hurried inside to escape the storm. Moments later, a tall young man rushed through the cafe door, shaking a rain from his coat. His name was Joseph Bernard, though Caroline did not know that yet. Joseph was a hard-working financial analyst who had been struggling to build his career in the competitive corporate world. He came from a humble family background and had spent years working tirelessly to prove himself. That evening, he had just left a difficult job interview and looked both exhausted and frustrated as he searched for an empty seat. The cafe was crowded because of the rain, leaving only one empty chair, across from Caroline. Hesitating slightly, Joseph politely asked if he could sit there. Caroline looked up from her book and smiled kindly before agreeing. What began as a simple request soon turned into an unexpected conversation. Joseph, though initially quiet, gradually relaxed as they spoke about ordinary topics, work, favorite books, the city's busy lifestyle. Caroline found his honesty refreshing, while Joseph admired her calm and thoughtful personality. Neither of them realized that this accidental meeting during a rainy evening would become the beginning of a relationship that would eventually change both of their lives forever. After their unexpected meeting at the cafe, Caroline and Joseph began seeing each other more often. What started as a simple conversation during a rainy evening gradually turned into a comfortable routine. Joseph began stopping by the cafe after work, sometimes hoping she would be there, though he rarely admitted it openly. Caroline, who had grown fond of the quiet atmosphere of the place, found herself visiting even more frequently. Their conversations slowly became longer and more personal. They spoke about their daily struggles, the pressure of adulthood, and the dreams they both carried quietly within their hearts. Joseph Bernard came from a modest family that had always struggled financially. His father, Martin Bernard, had worked for decades as a factory technician before retiring due to health problems, while his mother, Elena Bernard, managed a small tailoring business from their home. Joseph had grown up watching his parents work tirelessly just to maintain stability. Because of this, he developed a strong determination to succeed. He studied finance at university on scholarships and part-time jobs, often sacrificing comfort and leisure in order to move closer to his dream of becoming successful. Yet beneath his ambition was also a lingering insecurity. He constantly feared being looked down upon because of his background. Caroline listened to Joseph's stories with genuine interest and empathy. She admired his determination and his dedication to supporting his family. To Joseph, Caroline seemed different from anyone he had met before. She was calm, patient, and thoughtful in ways that surprised him. He often wondered how someone who appeared to live such a modest life carried such quiet confidence and wisdom. Meanwhile, Caroline found comfort in Joseph's honesty. For the first time since leaving her father's luxurious world, she felt she was forming a connection that was sincere and untouched by wealth or status. As the days passed and their friendship deepened, neither of them realized they were slowly stepping into something much deeper than friendship. As the weeks passed, the connection between Caroline and Joseph grew stronger. Their meetings at the cafe gradually turned into long walks through the city after sunset. Sometimes they would stroll through quiet streets lined with glowing streetlights, sharing stories about their past and their hopes for the future. Caroline spoke carefully about her childhood, choosing her words in a way that never revealed the truth about her wealthy background. Instead, she described a simple upbringing guided by a hard-working father who valued discipline and education. Joseph never questioned her words. To him, Caroline seemed sincere, gentle, and humble, everything he admired in a woman. Joseph often spoke passionately about his dreams. His greatest ambition was to become a respected executive in the corporate world. He believed that financial success would allow him to give his parents a comfortable life after all the years they had struggled. Sometimes, while sitting on a quiet park bench or sharing dinner at a modest restaurant, Joseph would speak about the future he imagined for himself. He dreamed of owning a beautiful house, building a strong career, and eventually creating a family where his children would never experience the hardships he had faced growing up. Caroline listened quietly, touched by the sincerity behind his words. Although Caroline was deeply moved by Joseph's determination, she carried a secret that weighed heavily on her heart. She had chosen to live an ordinary life to find someone who loved her for who she truly was, yet hiding her identity sometimes made her feel dishonest. There were moments when she considered telling Joseph the truth about her father, Pascal Desmond, and the enormous business empire connected to her name. But every time she thought about revealing it, fear stopped her. She worried that the moment Joseph discovered her true identity, everything between them might change. Instead, she made a silent promise to herself. She would continue living simply and allow their relationship to grow naturally, hoping that Joseph's feelings for her were truly genuine. Over time, the friendship between Caroline and Joseph naturally transformed into something deeper. Their meetings were no longer accidental or occasional. Joseph now waited for Caroline almost every evening after work, and Caroline began planning her days around the moments they would spend together. What once started as casual conversations slowly became emotional connections filled with trust, laughter, and quiet understanding. The small cafe where they first met had now become their special place. The owner of the cafe, an elderly woman named Mrs. Eleanor Wright, often watched them with a warm smile, noticing how their bond was growing stronger with every visit. Joseph admired Caroline's calm personality and the way she listened carefully whenever he spoke. She encouraged him during moments when he doubted himself and reminded him of his strengths whenever he felt overwhelmed by the pressures of his career. For Joseph, Caroline became a source of peace in a world filled with competition and uncertainty. Meanwhile, Caroline felt something she had never experienced before. Despite growing up in luxury, she had never known a love that felt this simple and genuine. Every moment with Joseph made her believe that leaving her wealthy life behind had been the right decision. One evening, as the sun slowly disappeared behind the city skyline, Joseph invited Caroline for a quiet dinner at a small restaurant near the river. The atmosphere was calm, and soft lights reflected beautifully across the water outside. After a long conversation about life and dreams, Joseph finally gathered the courage to express what had been growing in his heart for months. He looked at Caroline sincerely and confessed that he had fallen deeply in love with her. Caroline felt her heart race as she listened to his words. Without hesitation, she admitted that she felt the same way. That night, beneath the gentle glow of the city lights, their relationship officially changed from friendship into love, marking the beginning of a new chapter in both of their lives. As their love deepened, Joseph and Caroline began imagining a future together. Their relationship had grown naturally, built on trust and shared dreams. They spent countless evenings discussing what life might look like if they stayed together forever. Joseph often spoke about wanting stability, a home filled with warmth, and a partner who would stand beside him as he worked toward success. Caroline listened with quiet happiness, feeling certain that Joseph loved her for who she truly appeared to be, a simple woman living an ordinary life. Months later, Joseph made a heartfelt decision. One calm evening while they walked through a quiet garden park filled with glowing lanterns, Joseph stopped and looked at Caroline with seriousness in his eyes. He told her he could not imagine his life without her and asked if she. Joseph believed they were simply two ordinary people starting life together with very little but their determination. What he did not know was that Caroline had quietly arranged something important behind the scenes. Through her father's company network, she ensured that Joseph received an opportunity to work at one of the most promising corporate firms in the city, a company that was secretly part of Pascal Desmond's vast business empire. Joseph believed his new job was the result of his own hard work and good fortune, never realizing that his wife had silently opened that door for him. Married life began quietly for Caroline and Joseph. They moved into a modest apartment close to Joseph's new workplace, living a routine life that felt normal and peaceful. Every morning Joseph left early for the office, dressed neatly and filled with determination to prove himself at his new company. Caroline supported him in small but meaningful ways, preparing breakfast, encouraging him before important meetings, and listening patiently whenever he returned home tired from work. Joseph believed he had been incredibly lucky to secure such a promising job in a respected corporate firm, unaware that the company was actually part of the powerful Desmond corporate network owned by Caroline's father. Joseph quickly became known within the company for his intelligence and strong work ethic. His supervisors noticed how carefully he handled financial reports and strategic planning tasks. One of the senior executives, Mr. Daniel Whitaker, who served as the company's operations director, began observing Joseph's work closely. Daniel Whitaker was a disciplined and experienced corporate leader who had spent many years working directly under Pascal Desmond. Though Joseph did not know it, Whitaker had already received quiet instructions from Pascal to watch over Joseph's career. Pascal had never interfered openly, but he respected his daughter's marriage and wanted to ensure that Joseph had a fair opportunity to grow professionally. At home, Caroline remained humble and supportive, never revealing the influence she quietly held behind the scenes. She listened proudly whenever Joseph spoke about his workplace achievements and the respect he was beginning to earn among his colleagues. Joseph believed his career was finally moving toward the success he had always dreamed of. He often told Caroline that one day he would rise higher within the company and build a comfortable life for both of them. Caroline would simply smile and encourage him, hiding the truth that the company where he worked was part of the very empire her family had built. At that moment, their marriage still seemed stable, and neither of them imagined that the path ahead would soon lead to unexpected temptations and difficult choices. As Joseph's position in the company improved, his lifestyle slowly began to change. His colleagues often invited him to social gatherings after work, saying that networking outside the office was important for career growth. At first, Joseph rarely attended these events because he preferred spending evenings with Caroline. However, as time passed and his responsibilities increased, he began accepting more invitations. One particular evening, several co-workers persuaded him to join them at an upscale nightclub located in the heart of the city. The place was lively, filled with bright lights, music, and ambitious professionals hoping to build connections. That night was the first time Joseph met Tina Moore. Tina was known among the social circles of the city for her striking appearance and confident personality. She worked as a freelance event promoter and often attended high-end gatherings where wealthy business people and rising corporate employees gathered. Tina came from a very different background. Unlike Joseph, who had struggled through years of hard work, Tina believed success could be achieved through charm and strategic relationships. She was intelligent, observant, and skilled at understanding people's ambitions and weaknesses. When Tina first noticed Joseph sitting with his colleagues, she quickly sensed that he was different from the others. His serious demeanor and the respect his co-workers showed him suggested he was someone with growing influence. Curious, she approached the group and started a friendly conversation. Joseph, though slightly uncomfortable in the loud nightclub environment, remained polite and respectful. Tina was impressed by his intelligence and the way he spoke about his career goals. Meanwhile, Joseph found her lively personality entertaining after a long day of work. What seemed like a casual introduction slowly turned into a longer conversation throughout the evening. As the night continued, neither of them realized that this meeting inside the noisy club would quietly begin creating cracks in Joseph's once peaceful marriage with Caroline. After the night at the club, Joseph's routine slowly began to change in subtle ways. At first, it was small things that Caroline noticed. Joseph started coming home later than usual, often explaining that he had extra meetings or networking events with colleagues. Caroline believed him because she knew how important his career was to him. She continued supporting him with patience, preparing late dinners and waiting quietly for him to return home. Yet something about his behavior felt different. His attention seemed divided, and the warmth he once showed toward her was slowly fading. Meanwhile, Joseph and Tina began seeing each other more frequently. What started as casual conversations at social gatherings gradually turned into regular meetings. Tina was skilled at making Joseph feel admired and important. She often praised his intelligence and told him he deserved far greater recognition than he was receiving at work. These compliments appealed to Joseph's hidden insecurities and ambitions. With Tina, he felt a sense of excitement that was different from the calm and steady life he shared with Caroline. Instead of going straight home after work, Joseph began spending more evenings with Tina at restaurants, clubs, and social events. Caroline tried to ignore the growing distance between them, believing that the pressure of Joseph's job might simply be exhausting him. However, the quiet harmony that once filled their apartment was slowly disappearing. Conversations became shorter, dinners became silent, and Joseph seemed constantly distracted whenever they were together. Caroline still loved him deeply and continued treating him with kindness, hoping their relationship would return to the warmth it once had. She did not yet know that Joseph's growing closeness with Tina was about to push their marriage toward a painful turning point that neither of them could avoid. The tension inside Caroline and Joseph's home continued to grow quietly. Joseph was now spending more time outside, often returning late at night with vague explanations about work gatherings or client meetings. Caroline remained calm on the surface, but deep inside she felt an uneasy sense that something was wrong. The warmth and affection Joseph once showed her had almost disappeared. He seemed distracted, impatient, and sometimes even distant during their conversations. Caroline tried to convince herself that it was simply stress from his job, yet the feeling that something deeper was happening refused to fade. One evening, Caroline decided to walk through the city after finishing some errands. The night air was cool, and the streets were filled with people enjoying restaurants and late-night cafes. As she walked past one of the busiest entertainment districts, she noticed her familiar figure standing near the entrance of a stylish lounge. Her heart skipped for a moment when she realized it was Joseph. But he was not alone. Standing beside him was Tina Moore, the same woman Joseph had once mentioned meeting during a work gathering. They were laughing together in a way that felt far too intimate for casual acquaintances. Caroline stopped across the street, watching quietly as Joseph placed his arm around Tina's shoulder while they entered the lounge together. In that moment, everything became painfully clear. The late nights, the distant behavior, the sudden change in his attitude, every piece of confusion finally formed a single truth. Caroline felt a deep wave of heartbreak, but she remained composed. She did not create a scene or confront him immediately. Instead, she turned away silently and walked home alone. That night, sitting quietly in the dim light of their apartment, Caroline realized that the marriage she had trusted so deeply was now standing on the edge of collapse. The days following Caroline's discovery were heavy with silence. Joseph continued behaving as though nothing had happened, coming home late and speaking very little when he did. Caroline watched him quietly, studying the man she had once trusted with her whole heart. The apartment that once felt warm and peaceful now felt cold and distant. Every small interaction between them carried an invisible weight. Joseph seemed impatient whenever Caroline tried to speak with him, as though her presence had slowly become an inconvenience rather than a comfort. One evening, Joseph finally broke the silence. Sitting across from Caroline at the small dining table, he spoke with a seriousness that immediately told her something important was about to happen. His voice was calm but distant as he said their marriage was no longer working. He claimed their personalities had grown incompatible and that he needed freedom to focus on his future. Caroline listened quietly, her expression steady even though her heart felt heavy. Joseph avoided looking directly at her as he spoke, and it became clear that he had already made up his mind. Without arguing or pleading, Caroline accepted his decision. The divorce process happened quickly and without complication. Joseph believed that separating from Caroline would allow him to pursue a more exciting life alongside Tina Moore. To him, Caroline had always seemed like a simple woman with little influence or ambition. When the final papers were signed, he walked away feeling relieved, convinced he had made the right choice. Caroline left the courthouse calmly, her emotions hidden behind a quiet composure. Neither of them knew that this very day would mark the beginning of a dramatic turning point that would soon change both of their lives forever. After leaving the courthouse, Caroline walked slowly through the busy streets, her mind heavy with quiet thoughts. The end of her marriage had come far more quickly than she had imagined. For a moment, she allowed herself to feel the pain she had been holding back. She had left behind the life of wealth and privilege in order to find someone who would love her sincerely, yet that dream had collapsed in the most painful way. Still, Caroline remained composed. She believed that life had a way of revealing people's true character, and Joseph's choices had shown her a truth she could no longer ignore. As she returned to her small apartment to gather her belongings, her phone suddenly rang. The number displayed on the screen belonged to Mr. Daniel Whitaker, the senior executive from her father's corporate network. Caroline rarely received calls from him unless something important had happened. The moment she answered, she immediately sensed the seriousness in his voice. Whitaker spoke slowly and carefully, delivering news that made Caroline freeze in place. Her father, Pascal Desmond, had suddenly passed away earlier that day after a severe health complication. The words felt unreal as Caroline tried to process them. Only hours after the finalization of her divorce, the world she had known since childhood had changed completely. Pascal Desmond had not only been her father, but also the powerful leader behind an enormous corporate empire that employed thousands of people. With his passing, that responsibility now rested on Caroline's shoulders. Without hesitation, she packed her belongings and prepared to return to the Desmond family estate. The quiet life she had chosen was now over. A new chapter of responsibility, power, and difficult decisions was waiting for her, and she would soon step back into the world she had once left behind. Caroline arrived at the Desmond family estate late in the evening. The massive iron gates opened slowly as her car approached, revealing the grand mansion she had once called home. The place looked exactly as she remembered, elegant gardens stretching across the property, tall marble pillars at the entrance, and the quiet dignity of a residence that had witnessed decades of business meetings, family moments, and important decisions. Yet the atmosphere felt different now. The house that once carried her father's commanding presence now felt heavy with silence. Inside the mansion, several senior members of the Desmond corporate leadership were already waiting for her. Among them was Daniel Whitaker, who had served as one of Pascal Desmond's most trusted executives for many years. Whitaker greeted Caroline respectfully and led her into the large study that had once belonged to her father. The room still carried the scent of polished wood and old books. On the desk lay several legal documents prepared by the family attorneys. With calm professionalism, Whitaker explained that Pascal Desmond had left clear instructions regarding the future of his companies. As his only child, Caroline had inherited full ownership of the entire Desmond corporate empire. Although the responsibility was enormous, Caroline remained calm. Her father had spent years preparing her for this moment, teaching her the principles of leadership, strategy, and discipline. She listened carefully as the lawyers explained the structure of the companies and the responsibilities now placed under her authority. One detail immediately caught her attention. Among the many companies under the Desmond Group was the very firm where Joseph Bernard worked. Caroline understood instantly how ironic the situation had become. The man who had just divorced her believing she was ordinary was unknowingly working within the empire that now belonged entirely to her. For now, she said nothing about Joseph. Instead, she quietly accepted her role as the new leader of the Desmond Empire, knowing that the time for certain revelations would soon arrive. The following morning marked Caroline's first official day as the leader of the Desmond corporate empire. The headquarters of the Desmond Group stood proudly in the center of the financial district, a towering glass building that symbolized decades of innovation and success built by Pascal Desmond. As Caroline arrived at the building's private executive entrance, senior staff members greeted her with deep respect. News of Pascal's passing had spread quickly throughout the company network, and many employees were anxious about the future leadership of the powerful organization. Inside the executive conference hall, Caroline met with the board of directors for the first time in her new role. The room was filled with experienced executives who had worked alongside her father for many years. Among them were individuals responsible for overseeing the company's vast operations in finance, technology, logistics, and international trade. Daniel Whitaker stood beside Caroline, formally introducing her as the new owner and acting head of the Desmond Group. Although some board members were initially curious about how the young heiress would lead such a massive organization, Caroline spoke calmly and confidently as she outlined her vision for stability and continued growth. During the meeting, reports were presented regarding the performance of the various companies under the Desmond network. Caroline listened attentively, carefully studying the structure of each division. One particular report caught her attention, the financial analysis department of a subsidiary company where an employee named Joseph Bernard had recently been gaining recognition for his work. Caroline remained expressionless as she read the report, though the name was unmistakably familiar. She quietly instructed Whitaker to arrange a full executive board meeting within the week, requesting that senior employees from several divisions, including Joseph's department, be present. No one in the room understood the deeper reason behind her request. For Caroline, the moment of truth was slowly approaching, and she intended to reveal it in a way that no one in that room would ever forget. A few days later, the headquarters of the Desmond Group prepared for one of the most important meetings since the passing of Pascal Desmond. Executives, senior managers, and department representatives gathered inside the large boardroom on the top floor of the building. The atmosphere was serious and formal, as everyone understood that the meeting would introduce the new leadership that would guide the future of the entire company network. Many employees were curious about the person who had inherited such a powerful corporate empire. Among the invited department representatives was Joseph Bernard. His supervisor had informed him that his recent financial reports had impressed upper management, and he was selected to attend the meeting as part of his department's leadership team. Joseph arrived dressed in a formal suit, feeling both nervous and excited. He believed that attending such an important meeting might help him gain recognition from the company's new leadership. As he entered the boardroom, he noticed the presence of several powerful executives, including Daniel Whitaker, whom he had only seen from a distance before. The boardroom slowly filled with quiet conversations as everyone waited for the new owner of the Desmond Group to arrive. Joseph sat near the middle of the room with other department representatives, unaware of the surprise waiting ahead. He had no idea that the woman he had recently divorced was now the owner of the entire company where he worked. As the meeting was about to begin, the large doors at the front of the room opened slowly. Conversation stopped instantly as the executives stood up in respect, preparing to welcome the new leader of the Desmond Empire. The next moment would completely change Joseph's understanding of everything he thought he knew about Caroline. The large doors of the boardroom opened slowly, and the room immediately fell into complete silence. Every executive and department representative stood respectfully as the new leader of the Desmond Group stepped inside. Joseph initially kept his eyes on the conference table, assuming the new owner would be an older and experienced business figure who had worked alongside Pascal Desmond for years. But as the quiet footsteps moved closer toward the head of the table, something about the familiar presence made him glance up. The moment Joseph looked forward, his entire body froze. Walking confidently toward the front of the boardroom was Caroline Desmond. She was dressed in a refined and elegant business suit, her posture calm and composed, carrying the quiet authority of someone fully aware of her power. The atmosphere in the room shifted instantly as the executives greeted her with deep respect. Daniel Whitaker stepped forward and formally addressed the room, introducing her as the new owner and chief executive of the Desmond Group, the sole heir of the late Pascal Desmond. Joseph stared in disbelief, his mind struggling to process what he was seeing. Caroline did not look at him immediately. She calmly took a seat at the head of the long conference table, reviewing several documents before speaking to the room. Her voice was steady, professional, and completely different from the quiet woman Joseph believed he once knew. The executives listened attentively as she began discussing company performance and future strategies. Only after a few moments did Caroline slowly lift her eyes toward the section of the table where Joseph sat. Their eyes met briefly, and in that single moment Joseph realized the devastating truth. His ex-wife, the woman he had divorced believing she was ordinary, was now the most powerful person in the entire company. The silence inside the boardroom became heavy after the shocking revelation. Joseph sat frozen in his chair, still struggling to process the reality unfolding before him. His mind replayed every moment of his marriage with Caroline, the quiet apartment, the simple meals, the ordinary life he believed she had lived. Now those memories clashed with the image of the confident woman sitting at the head of the table, commanding the attention of the entire board of directors. The truth was undeniable. Caroline Desmond was not the ordinary woman he thought he had married. She was the heiress of one of the most powerful business empires in the country. Caroline remained calm and professional as she continued addressing the boardroom. Her leadership style reflected the discipline her father had taught her for many years. She discussed financial strategies, operational improvements, and upcoming corporate restructuring plans. The executives listened carefully, impressed by her clarity and confidence. Meanwhile, Joseph felt the weight of regret slowly settling in his chest. He realized that the job he had been so proud of, the opportunity he believed he had earned through hard work alone, had likely been connected to Caroline all along. After completing the main agenda of the meeting, Caroline closed the documents in front of her and looked around the room once more. Her eyes finally settled on Joseph. Her expression remained composed, but her voice carried a quiet authority as she spoke his name clearly in front of everyone. The room grew even more silent as she announced that Joseph Bernard was no longer needed in the company. She explained calmly that the organization required individuals who demonstrated loyalty, integrity, and sound judgment in both professional and personal matters. The decision was immediate. Joseph was officially dismissed from his position. No one in the room questioned the order. Within seconds, Joseph's career inside the Desmond Group ended under the authority of the woman he had once chosen to walk away from. The news of Joseph Bernard's dismissal spread through the company faster than anyone expected. Employees whispered quietly in hallways and office corridors, surprised by the sudden decision made directly by Caroline Desmond. Many of them had admired Joseph's rising career and believed he had a promising future within the company. But none of them understood the personal history behind the decision. To them, it simply appeared that the new CEO had made a firm leadership choice to protect the integrity of the organization. Joseph left the building in silence that afternoon, carrying a small box containing a few personal belongings from his office desk. The towering glass headquarters that once symbolized his success now felt distant and cold. As he stepped outside, the reality of his situation began to sink in. The career he had worked so hard to build had disappeared in a single meeting. His phone remained quiet as he walked slowly through the crowded streets, unsure of what he would do next. The confident life he once imagined was suddenly filled with uncertainty. Meanwhile, Joseph tried to reach Tina Moore, hoping at least she would support him during this difficult moment. But Tina had already disappeared from his life as quickly as she had entered it. Calls went unanswered, messages remained unread, and the social gatherings where she once spent her evenings no longer included him. Tina had always been drawn to success and influence, and once Joseph lost both, her interest vanished completely. For the first time, Joseph began to understand the consequences of the choices he had made. The excitement and the tension he once enjoyed had faded, leaving him alone to face the reality he had created. Days passed after Joseph's dismissal, and his life slowly began to unravel. Without his job at the Desmond Company, the stability he once depended on disappeared quickly. The apartment he had proudly rented after receiving his promotion now felt too expensive to maintain without a steady income. Each morning he woke up with the heavy realization that everything he had built over the past few years had collapsed in a matter of moments. The confidence he once carried was replaced by quiet frustration and growing regret. Joseph spent many hours reflecting on the past, replaying the decisions that had led him to this point. The memories of Caroline began returning to him with painful clarity. He remembered how supportive she had been during the early days of his career, how she listened patiently whenever he spoke about his ambitions, and how she encouraged him when he doubted himself. She had never complained about their simple lifestyle, never demanded anything from him, and had always treated him with kindness. Only now did Joseph begin to understand how rare and genuine her loyalty had been. The truth became painfully obvious to him. The success he once believed was entirely his own had quietly been connected to Caroline's presence in his life. Without her influence, the opportunities that had lifted him upward might never have existed. The woman he had dismissed as ordinary had actually been the foundation beneath his entire career. Realizing this filled Joseph with deep regret. He understood too late that he had abandoned someone who had cared for him sincerely. But by the time this understanding reached him, the distance between his life and Caroline's powerful new world had already become impossible to cross. Weeks after the dramatic boardroom meeting, the Desmond Group continued operating smoothly under Caroline's leadership. The headquarters building that once belonged to her father now carried her authority and vision. Employees gradually grew to respect her calm decision-making and her ability to lead without arrogance. Instead of ruling through fear, Caroline focused on strengthening the company's structure, improving employee welfare, and expanding the organization's future projects. Many senior executives who had once doubted whether she could manage such a powerful empire now recognized the discipline and intelligence she had inherited from Pascal Desmond. Outside the business world, Caroline also began rebuilding her personal life. The painful chapter of her marriage with Joseph had taught her an important lesson about trust and self-respect. She no longer carried the sadness she once felt when leaving the courthouse that day. Instead, she focused on moving forward with confidence. She returned to some of the simple hobbies she had always loved, reading late at night, painting quiet landscapes, and occasionally visiting ordinary cafes where she could sit peacefully without the pressure of her corporate responsibilities. Despite her powerful position, she remained the same thoughtful woman who valued sincerity above wealth. Meanwhile, Joseph lived a very different reality. His once promising career had disappeared, and the life he imagined with Tina had vanished along with her sudden departure. Though he often thought about Caroline and the mistakes he had made, he knew their paths would never cross in the same way again. Caroline had stepped fully into her role as the leader of the Desmond Empire, carrying forward the legacy of her father with strength and dignity. The painful experiences she endured had not broken her, they had shaped her into someone wiser and stronger. With the past behind her, Caroline Desmond quietly stepped into a future filled with new opportunities, proving that sometimes the end of one chapter becomes the powerful beginning of another. And that brings us to the end of today's story. The world of luxury often hides stories deeper than what meets the eye. If you enjoyed this story, be sure to like, share, and subscribe for more captivating stories on luxury jewel stories. Until our next story, take care and stay tuned for more.